I'd like to thank one of the sponsors of my channel, MyPillow. Go to mypillow.com/Natalie. Use code Natalie to get money off for great sleep today.
Those things where you got to pinch yourself, just to make sure that you're not dreaming.
To make sure that someone you care about is actually waking you up and wasting your time to let you know this.
I'm gonna just go ahead and pinch him right now.
I think pinch him right.
Music should be your life, period. You need to live it. You need to eat it, sleep it, wake up, and the only way you're ever even going to have a chance to make it in this business is if you're willing to sacrifice everything to achieve your goal.
Legendary Seattle grunge rocker Chris Cornell has died.
Cornell was the frontman for Soundgarden.
Rock fans all over are remembering the life and career of music icon Chester Bennington today.
The 41-year-old Linkin Park singer was found dead, and CBS 2's Jeff Nguyen is live. He's in Palos Verdes Estates where he was found, and it looks like suicide, Jeff.
That is what the coroner... Cornell, him and his wife had a foundation. Him and Chester were best friends. The conspiracy theory, I don't know if it's true, but they found out some shit. They found out some shit.
Let's be respectful.
No.
Like, we don't know.
I don't know. I'm not naming any names. But you got to look into it.
Okay. But this guy just died, man. I just don't think this is shit to speculate on.
That's why you should speculate it when you find out the connection and the way they died.
Let's not do this, man.
No.
I don't want to even do this. I don't even want to do this.
Okay, all right. Okay. I'm just looking into it because I love Chester. I love Chester. I love Linkin Park. Who got you into Linkin Park? I got you into Linkin Park.
I understand. I don't want to talk about conspiracy theories involved in this guy's death, especially when he just died. It just seems so disrespectful.
The sounds of the early thousands wouldn't be complete without the echoing melody of angst and of the alternative. Linkin Park and Soundgarden. Heartbreak, I know. If you're like me, you had a hard time accepting the official narrative surrounding the deaths of these two very prominent rock stars, Chris Cornell, then Chester Bennington. Their talent and voices were loved by many across the globe, as they were unique and powerful in their nature. They wailed and emitted emotions that were felt from even the most unique households. They helped us cope with personal troubles, angst, and all the waves of emotion we were faced with in our adolescence. So, identifying with their music, it wasn't an easy feat to accept the news and the official story, especially with narrowing details. In this 3-part series, this being part 1, we're going to be examining these events from different angles in which we'll validate certain concerns with the narrative whilst correcting other branching narratives. I will state that there is a lot of information and research that resulted in our digging, some of which will have no ends or conclusions, but nonetheless important to present anyway. This is my collective effort to bring everything factual to the table, and with that, let the facts speak for itself. Before we jump in, I must preface and make something very clear. I am not a criminal investigator, nor am I a forensic scientist. I come from the world of data analytics, so naturally my nature likes to unpack, reverse engineer, and investigate. I am observing and analyzing information that is publicly made available with the application of critical thinking. There is an imperative duty to keep the integrity of events surrounding these two respected rockers, because if there is any justice in the exposure of what really went on, despite the narrative that was fed to us, weeding out the inflated details is a task we must complete first. And the reason why this is important is because although we can theorize the what ifs, published and known details will give enough corroborative understanding to know that some things just don't add up about these two. So why not just stick to that? These viral narratives made a huge cluster tangle. So now let's unwind some of it. Let's dive into what got us here in the first place. There was a narrative that went viral on social media. You probably have seen it, which is probably what brought you to watch this anyway. Let's recap. The theory espouses that Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington were involved in funding and backing an up-and-coming documentary on child sex trafficking called The Silent Children. What was the source for this theory? A single tweet. That's right. It came from an account called An Open Secret. This is what the tweet claimed. Chris Cornell was the main financial backer for a documentary, The Silent Children, about child sex trafficking. After he died, the project was canceled. Chester Bennington was going to appear in the documentary. His band, Linkin Park, was going to contribute music. First, a little background on this account. It is the shared feature name of their documentary, An Open Secret. It is a documentary investigation into the accusations of teenagers being sexually abused within the film industry. Gabe Hoffman is the owner and producer of this An Open Secret documentary. He is also allegedly the owner, or at least connected to, the Twitter account. So this may lend some initial credibility upon the public to perceive this as some legitimate information. They also shared what seemed to be their source. These were screenshots of an alleged transcript of this up-and-coming documentary. So because this tweet's information was so sensational, it caused many to look into it and also question the documentation source. It is alleged that many got blocked for asking for more information, but that is just an allegation for now. Whilst looking at the still standing tweet, you can see that the ask is still evident, as some of these tweets are still up, looking for the original sourcing of this document. As there was much inquisition, an Open Secret Twitter account did respond to tweets in likeness with the following. They say, we posted documents, and then from a now suspended account, they responded to another tweet saying, they're not public documents. That's what a reveal is called. Are you purposely trolling or something? And then continued on with their rant saying, when you spend $1.5 million making a critically acclaimed, groundbreaking documentary about child sex abuse in Hollywood, people send you the documents for related projects. And this was in a response to someone asking, where's the source? Anyone can make up stories, in which the screenshots were posted under this thread. I'm going to speculate that an open secret and or Gabe Hoffman alleged to have received the document via inside sources. The context to this document could be totally missing, as these screenshots only display page 2 and 7 out of 12 pages. Without significant evidence that Chris Cornell was the financial backer and or that Chester Bennington was going to appear as a cameo within. I myself reached out to Gabe Hoffman in hopes of retrieving some additional detail, and I got this reply, in which I asked at first, hey Gabe, would you happen to still have a copy of the Silent Children transcript / rundown file? I would love to look into the full details contained. Gabe responded, I received what I received in strict confidence. I tweeted documentation of the project's existence. As you know, I am not at liberty to release additional information. In which I replied, oh shucks, I totally understand that. Is there a person or place you can point me to so that I can get more financial expenditure information on Cornell's funding of this project? Thank you for your response, by the way, I really appreciate it. In which you can see that the reaction was a like, but with no additional response after that. After this tweet, there were no additional sources or information to supplement the claim that Chris Cornell or Chester Bennington were ever committed to be part of the project. Back to the tweet from an open secret. So not only did individuals go back and forth for more sourcing information, one user in particular, Alessandro Varon from TotalDisclosure.net, had a significant exchange with Gabe Hoffman, a person associated with an open secret Twitter account. Alessandro himself was exploring many theories when it came to Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell and many others' death. Amongst his exploration of their deaths, he himself scoped in on this piece of information tweeted by an open secret and essentially found himself in a war with Gabe Hoffman and an open secret concurrently. Speculations were exchanged with threats of lawsuits, insults, were exchanged, a war of words. So, Alessandro, thank you so much for joining me and for, regrouping on your experience with this. I think it's pretty integral and pivotal in kind of excavating through, finding out what actually happened with the sad narrative. And we'll begin with the initial tweet, the 35K reveal, which is a big piece that you kind of explored through. But basically, in a nutshell, stated that Chris Cornell was a financial backer. It had a few screenshots of page 2, page 7, but nothing really to that. So from there, I imagine that you went down a rabbit hole, right? You saw the tweet, especially the 35K reveal. Is that where you took it from, 35K reveal, and you started a rabbit hole?
Initially, because I was more in contact with NT, it was through NT's blinds on Crazy Days and Nights. When I questioned, obviously I had seen Gabe Hoffman's tweet, but I didn't have the realization that was the whole root of the theory for saying something.
Okay. So NT, for my viewers who don't know what NT is, this is the entertainment lawyer, right? That's why he uses NT.
Right. He's the owner of Crazy Days and Nights, and he has a daily podcast. I think he did like 4 episodes on Chris Cornell that were very good. Lots of information there that at the time we didn't know. And he helped me a lot in crafting the timeline of how things happened that night, because obviously we had, for the most part, we had what the mainstream media said, which was for the most part bullshit.
Right.
And, he came in to fill some holes, and I was able to verify most of the things he said. And from there, I took it off with the other two people. We started publishing material regarding the silent children because we believed our source. And then we find out that our source was basing everything on this guy that is known for actually going after victims, going after journalists, going after things that have happened like Pizzagate or things like that, even if you can say there are things that don't jive with reality as far as Pizzagate goes, you can put some things into trial, but other things seem pretty straightforward to me.
Right.
So, it's just the kind of person that is, for me, it's a plant. He's there to be a plant. He's there to be in control of opposition, to be a gatekeeper. And that's his purpose in life, it seems.
And so the owner allegedly of An Open Secret, which, just keeping it in context for legal reasons, An Open Secret, allegedly Gabe Hoffman runs or is affiliated with that Twitter account. Gabe Hoffman is the director, owner, producer of a documentary called An Open Secret. Obviously, that's the account's name. And so from here, you start to, did you ever outreach to Gabe Hoffman for information? How did that experience go?
Yes, Gabe and I connected on Facebook. Actually, he liked my page first, the film page. So I was like, oh, cool, this is a big account. I was excited because I was starting on this. I had probably 3 months since I created Total Disclosure. I spoke with Gabe Hoffman. And when I asked him where he got the information, where he got the lead, he basically just referred me to an article that referred back to his tweet. So, it
was a cycle of information.
Exactly. And it's like, so this article on, I think it was that website that is based on blockchain, that the articles cannot be removed. That's where I found it. I'm sure I can get you the link.
Sure.
But it was basically, him saying, well, I'm the source and you should believe me because I'm the owner of all truths.
Right. So from there, you started excavating more as, we explored through these topics where we're trying to just grasp it and we're trying to find concrete documentation. I think that's the whole point. Right. And every single time it led back to Gabe Hoffman, it was like a dead end. It was like, I can't get you the documentation. Am I getting that right?
Oh, yeah. Well, with him, it was like, he's not a very nice person to talk with, even if you're on good terms with him. It seems like for the most part, he has an attitude. I'm not going to say he was hostile right off the gate, but I can certainly feel like he didn't want to be talking with anybody in the specifics about this. Perhaps because he knows it was a psychological operation of some sorts, right? So, not in his best interest. If he's one, because we don't know for sure, right? Right. If he's one of the main planners of whatever this was, obviously he doesn't want that coming back to him. The problem is that when you see all the links that he has, not only in Hollywood, with the film industry and whatever.
With this, you had some word exchanges because I suppose that you were making content kind of trying to explain that, hey, I'm trying to get this information. It's not coming out of him. And so that's when you guys started having a war on social media, word exchanges. He was obviously there's screenshots of him trying to get your messages taken down.
Yes, at first it was all cordial. At first, obviously, he saw me as an useful idiot, I guess, because I was being used as a megaphone to whatever he was trying to do, without my knowledge. Obviously, I didn't know I was pushing fake information. I made the mistake of trusting a source almost blindly, which is something that we tend to do in the beginning, right?
Yes, absolutely. Especially when it's so vague, the information out there that the mainstream puts out, right? That they don't obviously put everything out there. So you're sitting here as an independent journalist, as somebody who's trying to excavate the truth. You're like, okay, where else can I look? So a lot of times that happens, where we run into that.
And to be honest, at the time, I didn't even consider myself a journalist because when I started doing this, that was too big of a title. I felt like I was just someone that admired Chris Cornell's music and his purpose against human trafficking, and I wanted to share what I found with people. But I never thought about trying to have a channel, try to make films. That wasn't on the agenda at first. That just came later on. The problem with Gabe started mostly because he started discrediting other theories that we were also researching. You can argue that he was also going after satanic ritual abuse survivors, which I'm sure you saw the screenshots as well, going after people like Fiona Barnett, going after 𝘰𝐞𝐿𝐴𝐵𝘳𝐵 for some reason, because, you can argue that 𝘰𝐞𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐳𝐵 was a character and that perhaps he was talking many names without tangible proof. But why are you going to get so pissed off at that if it's not talking about you? Then perhaps it's talking about someone you work for. Or someone you created with. And that's when the whole thing started. Then 𝘐𝑝y dies in very mysterious situations. Someone that I spoke with, not on the regular, maybe once every 2 months. And every road in 𝘐𝑝y's death, if you want to believe that he's dead, because some people don't want to believe that. Some people say he's alive. Me personally, I don't believe in those theories that, like Jim Morrison is alive and he was rushed limbo and Tupac is hiding in Isla Margarita in Venezuela or some shit. I don't buy it.
I think what you're saying is it's honest and it's fair because kind of taking it back, we don't really know everything up front, but there are some credible, theories, not necessarily because I think people have conspiracy theory in a negative connotation, but there are some pretty credible theories out there. Like, let's just take Pizzagate, not to go on a super tangent, it's relative to this, but if you take Pizzagate, at least there are a lot of corroborative details that kind of, it's like, there's a big question here. So that's, we're taking this in parallel to your research, how, you kind of took different things and you found corroborative details. Now, from your War of Wars, you had your platforms taken down, you had your Patreon, you had your Twitter, you had your Facebook page, and there are credible screenshots that show this, that, hey, go report as many accounts as you can. But then after that, when it got a little bit more serious, you started getting threat emails, death threats. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah, the first threat was actually like a month after 𝘐𝑝y died, because I guess I was pushing too far with it. I was already involved in Hoffman, not in the murder per se, but in the gaslighting that happened previous to that. So obviously, because people were saying 𝘐𝑝y killed himself, if you are gaslighting or harassing somebody like that killed himself, in my opinion, we're going to talk about it. So I felt like, okay, I have this thing with Gabe Hoffman in which we have like an indirect relationship because of NT, but I don't owe nothing to the guy. So I started talking my mind about what happened. And what happened is that before that, there had already been an encounter between him and I, because I was an admin at the Crazy Days and Nights group that had like, I don't know, 20,000 people or something like that. And I started posting about some things that were going on inside NT's world that were a little strange, regarding possible blackmail, possible external influences, that in the end, they lead to Gabe Hoffman as well. So I'm not gonna say like it came out of nowhere, this threats or this anything. It has a history. It was brewing for 8 months or so. So by the time I started getting those threats, it was a bribe offer at the same time and a threat, because they sent a picture of my address with Google Maps to my email. So that was like letting me know, you either take this, shut the or we know where you live. And it doesn't matter if you live outside the States, so obviously I didn't take that kindly, but I'm not one to back down. So instead of backing down to Hoffman, I actually started going stronger after him.
Right.
And I had no evidence it was him, send a threat, but it kind of seemed like, right? Because the email asked me to delete information from him. And who is he? Like, I can understand Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein, and a lot of people want to protect them.
Right.
Protect themselves.
Right.
Know? But Gabe Hoffman, who is he important for? And when you start thinking about who could be covering for this guy, you find out that nobody's going to be covering for this guy but himself.
Right.
Or the people that work for him.
You know, you drew, I want to take you back to the person who was making these videos on you, but there were some characteristics in that email that you got, and you tied it to some of the characteristics of him. Now, we're not saying that this is the person, but you are speculating that it could be a person due to the characteristics that were exhibited throughout the email. For instance, we'll pay you by cryptocurrency. What was it, like through Bitcoin or something like that? And that is a characteristic.
Like $5,000 Bitcoin. And it was at the same time that this all was brewing. So at the time, you could argue that I was also being hounded by Vicky Cornell and her people, because I was. I mean, the first time I was doxxed, it was Chris Cornell's mother-in-law who published my name online. So you could argue that there's several suspects, because I was obviously covering several subjects in several cases at the same time. But when this threat happened, clearly the rivalry was between me and Gabe. And I wouldn't say rivalry because I didn't even care about what he posted or anything like that, but there was clear gang stalking agenda with him, because he even sent me the screenshots of the documentation that were filing against me for Facebook, Twitter, like how many posts I made about him, how many followers I got, how faster I was growing, because my Facebook account grew from 100 to 10,000 people in a month. So, obviously, that's something that was alarming to them, and they felt the need that they had to hack me down by any means necessary. And that's what they did. They sent their lawyers to Patreon. They also sent multiple complaints to PayPal and to Twitter, and they basically cut my business from the root, which was podcasting at the time.
Right. And so, just as a side comment, versus releasing more of the documentation, which again, we only got screenshots of the Silent Children transcript from page 2 and page 7. Obviously, there must have been a page 1 and then a 3 through 6, and maybe over 7, maybe it was 8 through whatever. There could have been a little excerpt from that said Chris Cornell was a financial backer, and that's what would have quelled our curiosity. So, which is why your instance is very interesting to me, that it went from not providing that documentation all the way to deplatforming, to getting death threats in your email, and so that's why I feel that this is a very important instance. Now, taking it back to DeFango.
The love affair between me and Gabe Hoffman is over. It's over. I mean, I don't think that there was ever a love affair out there, but I'm just going to be super unadulterated. This is going to be a direct one. If I see people chatting in the chat, I might pick something up, but we're going to just talk about this one directly. So everybody knows that I've been having Gabe Hoffman on the show for all I ask is that guys like Gabe Hoffman don't promote LARPing ass like Tiffany Venchia Fitzhenry. The girl that we looked up, found to have a criminal record, found to not be a Hollywood insider, and found to, basically have been lying about all of her history.
What was it, that person that turned on Gabe Hoffman, where it was like that was his friend and then he turned? I think that's really significant.
That's the one. And he's on video threatening people and doxing several, even blackmailing people, like asking someone to send him $1,000, otherwise he's going to publish. When a person is evidence in doing those kind of things, for me, it's not outside the realm of possibility for him to be sending death threats and bribe offers for someone like Gabe Hoffman. Obviously, I would never assure 100% it's him, because I don't do those things without tangible evidence.
Right.
But, it's all the things revolving around it, because listen what happened last time when my wife first came to my country, 9 months ago. I received a notice from 𝘏𝘲𝘮𝘬. I have my website. 𝘏𝘲𝘮𝘬 is the one that hosts it. They sent me a warning that I had to take down every single article that named Gabe Hoffman, 𝘰𝐞𝐿, and 𝘥𝘠𝘬𝘍𝑚. So what does these people have in common? What does 𝘥𝘠𝘬𝘍 from the Silent Children has in common with Gabe Hoffman? If someone can answer me that, maybe I can stop being so suspicious.
Right.
But in my mind, if Gabe Hoffman wants what I published about 𝘥𝘠𝘬𝘍 also taken away, it's because he is to some degree involved with these people, or he has a greater agenda regarding the murder of Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington. Something he wants to keep hush-hush. There's a reason why he wanted to deviate from Jeffrey Epstein. And there's a reason why he has been trying to deviate from Jeffrey Epstein from the Clintons. And he always, like, he even says that there's no evidence that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were linked to Mossad. So, you have to be blind to say that.
Even there's mainstream media articles that link Epstein to Mossad. So I think that part was pretty significant that, Defengo to me was pivotal in my perspective. The fact that he turned against Gabe Hoffman, that to me was a big pivotal piece because obviously, there is some sad narratives or maybe things that people end up disagreeing on. And this being, one piece of source of information where we think that we're getting the documentation, we think we're getting it from the source, but it turns out when did that come out? About 2017, 2018, just a few years later, still there has been nothing that's been revealed from that.
Exactly. So the first time I think Gabe Hoffman came out with that was around September 2018. The time that he and Defengo were working together very closely was all of 2019. As far as I understand, that continued until the beginning of 2020, and they had a fallout. That, for all we know, could be fake. It could be something that they just tried to put it out there so people wouldn't link them anymore. Mm-hmm. But obviously, even if it's Defengo's testimony, because it's him saying what happened with Gabe, it's someone that we cannot give much credence to. At the same time, we have to look at this like if it's a criminal investigation, because if you're gonna, categorize people in between suspects and non-suspects and main suspect, there's a reason behind it. There's a reason why Defengo and Gabe are suspects in what happened to me. And I would say that in court. I cannot say that they are 100% responsible, but I will say that, in my opinion, there are certainly main suspects.
Well, this is definitely, again, integral in finding out the true, I think, the true source of, that information. I think both of us in our own independent discoveries and investigations, we hit a dead end every single time we're trying to find the concrete documentation, something that supports this, and even after, so long after the Silent Children, there's a lot that suggests that it disintegrated along the way as well. You would think that this would be released, ever after the said project is disintegrated, done, not going forward.
Something would come out. Anything.
Right.
Or a person, someone close to them saying, listen, yeah, he spoke to me, he was into this. Anything. It's been 3 years, nada. It's been radio silent. And I think we shouldn't go that far. We should look at who were close to them, who were their bodyguards, who were with them the day they died, who were these bodyguards close to, who were they working with.
Via the original source of this theory, an open secret, and their document screenshots exhibits that this will get us nowhere that route. So let's turn to the Silent Children documentary itself. We'll start with 𝘥𝘠𝘮𝘍, the founder of Traffic Jam and the entity responsible for the documentary. According to GuideStar, Traffic Jam facilitates and supports prevention, rescue, and aftercare rehabilitation programs through frontline partners as part of a modern-day abolitionist movement to eradicate human trafficking and slavery globally.
A lot of these countries we work in, these kids graduate or age out of these institutional orphanages, often corrupt institutional orphanages, where even the directors will call the traffickers and let them know when certain kids are being released. I'm now involved in a campaign, Traffic Jam. They're seeking to unite musicians and their fans to jam up child trafficking around the world while also jamming to make a difference. We have got a lot of artists that have given us signed instruments as part of this Instruments of Change program. I've got a beautiful guitar here that was donated to us by Dave Matthews. He signed it. He's put some pretty incredible artwork on it here because he believes in this cause, and he believes that this instrument can be an instrument of change. Just a stroke of a pen can break the chains of slavery for a child.
And as he stated, it is notable that Paul Myhill did end up rubbing elbows with some prominent stars in that day, the ability to attend award shows. But as far as the specific involvement of celebrities or prominent names, there isn't a lot of traceable documentation on this particular matter. Looking into their nonprofit information, I found that Traffic Jam actually auto-revoked via the IRS for failure to file in 3 consecutive years in 2016. Even more curious, let's take a look at IMDb for The Silent Children, the film itself. One of the key production companies, Jelly Bean Productions, was owned by Lisa Bean, Leroy Moore, saxophonist from Dave Matthews Band, his fiancée. Note that Leroy Moore died in 2008. Noted that this documentary was set to debut in 2013, I find it additionally curious that Jelly Bean Productions canceled their corporation in January of 2017. Alessandro Varin, the mentioned journalist that got in a spat with Gabe Hoffman, reached out to Paul Myhill for clarification about the funding and got this response. Thanks for reaching out, Alessandro. The Silent Children project never really got off the ground. I don't believe the producer secured any financial support. I'm not aware of Chris Cornell being interested, but I was out of the loop as far as who was contacted for potential funding. Best of luck with your endeavor. As an added context, Paul and Alessandro had another exchange via email about some concerning matters speculated about Paul's tattoo in a now deleted post, where Paul addresses some also additional information about the lifespan of the documentary. Reading it in full composition, Paul Myhill writes to Alessandro, "Alessandro, hey brother, I was rather shocked by reading your content about me today. I'm reaching out to clarify some things and ask for your due consideration and action. First of all, let me begin by saying I am a conservative Christian and am disgusted by many of the same things you write and broadcast about. My wife led me to the Lord in 1993, and I have served in church and broader ministry roles for many years, primarily to champion for abused and exploited children, and especially after adopting an abandoned child in our family in 2001. The Silent Children documentary project never got funded, pretty much the same year that the video treatment was done, 2012, although IMDb has it listed at 2013 because of submission timing, I suppose. The project was essentially canceled. Traffic Jam as an organization was officially dissolved shortly thereafter, 2014, as we directed our funding partners to send donations directly to the frontline indigenous churches we worked with, instead of running funds through the organization. I have kept the trademark and other platforms alive. However, just for my own personal advocacy efforts, the Silent Children producer's website keeps automatically updating the copyright year each year. But we're actually talking about something that happened briefly 8 years ago, almost a decade. Now, the extent of my involvement was to chat about the concept over the phone and then fly out to Los Angeles to be interviewed. All the footage in treatment was my own, not the film crew's, and was taken from Mission Trip videos. The 4 men in your post were never involved. I don't believe the producers ever reached out to them either, and they have clarified this with me after our brief exchange on Messenger. Certainly, if they had reached out to them, they have known how to spell Linkin Park correctly. Despite all the celebrities I've met over the years as part of my advocacy efforts to raise awareness for trafficked and enslaved kids, I have never met any of these 4 men. I did get a signed guitar from Linkin Park at one point, but that was through the Grammy Foundation as an intermediary. I'm definitely grateful for that, but no discussion or meeting was ever involved. These men's tragic deaths came years after the project was already canceled, and there is no relation to the project whatsoever. To address your other remarks, yes, I have photos with Elton John and Katy Perry. I usually only get a few short minutes to share about the child trafficking issue around the world. Both those meetings were very impromptu and brief. Elton was seated at a table near me at a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and Katy was seated in front of me at the American Music Awards show. The extent of those meetings was handing them a card asking them to please help raise awareness about child trafficking around the world and getting a photo. I don't usually judge celebrities when I meet with them. I just share my thoughts and leave it to God to do the rest. My wife and I married in Maui, Hawaii, and try to go back every few years to celebrate. We have a number of Hawaiian tribal-themed tattoos as a result. The image you matter-of-factly stated as a pedophile image is actually a stylized 𝘐𝑜ru, a Maori spiral symbol for new life. To me, it's reference to being a born again. As I received my new life in Christ, I asked the artist not to close the spiral, but to instead have the center stroke proceed out of the spiral to also symbolize eternal life. To state that it was the same image, which it is clearly not, that is so repugnant to me, does me a great disservice indeed. Brother, surely logic would also dictate that I wouldn't be involved in anti-child trafficking efforts while also having a pedo image on my skin, don't you think? That would be akin to somebody working to strengthen Jewish communities while also having an iron cross and swastika tattooed on them, would it not? If you looked at all my other tattoos, you'd see that they are primarily heritage crosses, Bible verses, prayers, and justice-related themes, all in line with my beliefs and desire to help others less fortunate than myself. I'm fully aware that there are nefarious networks dealing with the trafficking of children. I'm really not upset at all that people speculate and create awareness on such things. Yes, powerful men and women are behind the scenes exploiting these children. Please continue to foster that discussion and to challenge the media narrative. But I'm obviously upset that you would imply that I'm somehow involved in the very thing I've committed to fight. I respectfully ask that you please take down the picture and references to me, as they are already causing me unnecessary harm and damage. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you're more than welcome to publish my responses, but I implore you to please remove the content that is so unfairly disparaging to me right now. I'm a fighter with you. We have the same goals in him, 𝘏𝘠𝘬𝘍. And since then, Alessandro actually did remove the posts about 𝘏𝘠𝘬𝘍. And this brings me to another spin-off narrative deriving from this theory. Really, this was parroted through social media. As you'll see in this tweet, it states, the project initially founded by Leroy Moore, Dave Matthews Band, and his fiancée, Lisa Bean, was canceled after Cornell's death in 2017. #SilentNoMore. trigger word child trafficking, and then continued on. You can see that this was parroted throughout social media, where it also states the same thing. These 4 men were working on a documentary called The Silent Children before they all committed suicide. Hashtag silent no more, hashtag sex trafficking, hashtag child trafficking, hashtag conspiracy theory. And then continued in this thread, this user states, within the span of a single year, the project initially founded by Leroy Moore, Dave Matthews Band, and his fiancée Lisa Bean was canceled after Cornell's death in 2017. We just demonstrated that the 2 key entities responsible for this project dissolved their organizations or companies prior to Chris Cornell's death. Another question to this narrative also is, when did Leroy Moore start this project if its goal debut was 2012-2013? Because Leroy Moore died in 2008. So we revisit this information put out by an open secret and question the following. Between Traffic Jam, Paul Myhill's organization, revoked as a nonprofit for failing to file for their 990 for 3 consecutive years back in 2016, and Jelly Bean Productions dissolving their corporation in January of 2017, Chris Cornell died May 18th, 2017. Would this make sense that he would be funding a documentary at a time within the dissolving of these said entities? When exactly did the financial backing from Chris Cornell come into place? Perhaps an open secret and Gabe Hoffman can answer this question one day, especially now that we know that Traffic Jam was dissolved and the production company was closed. I wouldn't see a need to shield this information anymore, but that's just my personal opinion. With all this being said, I think the best thing to do at this point is divorce ourselves from this theory for now, until somebody can produce concrete documentation that we can all purvey for absolute context that this said narrative is indeed true. But just know that there are far greater details that we will focus on in this series that are enough to suggest that something isn't right about their deaths and how the mainstream reported it. Let's take a look at some initial philanthropic ambitions and activities Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington were involved with. Let's start with Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell and his wife, Vicki, operated a foundation called the Chris and Vicki Cornell Foundation. Chris had a big passion for helping refugees. Upon examining the present-day version of the Chris and Vicki Cornell Foundation website, the following description is given about the foundation. The Chris and Vicki Cornell Foundation was formed in late 2012 with the mission to protect vulnerable children around the world. The foundation supports organizations that provide shelter and resources for homeless, abused, and at-risk youth, children living in refugee camps, and victims of human trafficking. While most of their philanthropic work has been private and anonymous, Chris and Vicki formed the foundation based on their personal experiences working in the child protection space. The foundation initially focused on helping homeless and neglected children in Chris's hometown in Seattle and other private donations. Last year, the producers of the film The Promise, a love story set against the backdrop of the Armenian genocide, approached Chris to record the movie's theme song. The beautiful ballad with its inspirational lyrics has been embraced by human rights and refugee aid groups and is a clarion call to people who are about the plight of refugees and victims of war. Chris and Vicki decided that all proceeds of the song would be donated to the International Rescue Committee to support their work. Performing more digs in retrospective, I noticed that there was an alluded earlier version of the site's description that included the quote, "Having had a personal experience of what it means to be a vulnerable child, Chris is passionate about making a difference in the lives of others." I tried to look up the cache of this older version page of the website with no success. However, I did find articles that alluded to the same exact quote. In pertinence to this older version of the website, it also gives insight to what focal point exactly his foundation served. On an archived version of the website, it shows the main focus and activity of the foundation going towards the relief of child foster care, poverty, abuse, and neglect. And as you guys would know, these are foundational aspects of child exploitation. So it looks to be that his foundation aimed to be preventative of that. Very interestingly, KeepTalkingGreece.com wrote an article covering his charity work in Greece right before his death. Written April 10th, 2017, U.S. rocker Chris Cornell visited a refugee camp in Athens to hear firsthand the stories and the plight of people fleeing war. Cornell and his wife, 𝘱𝑰𝑐𝐿𝑒𝑖𝑎nis, visited the 𝘱𝑰𝑐𝐿𝑒𝑖𝑎nis camp beginning of the month. The camp hosts mostly Afghan refugees. The Cornell family visited the camp together with the International Rescue Committee, for which they donate part of their music sales revenues. The couple has a foundation that protects children around the world. Cornell, whose Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation protects vulnerable children around the world, met refugee families and heard firsthand the harrowing stories of their escapes, the separation of children from their parents, and the stress and uncertainty of day-to-day life, an organizer told page6.com. As it is noted on the Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation website, they did partner with organizations in branching their efforts, one of them being Phoenix House, Child Haven, as mentioned, as well as the International Rescue Committee. Now, the International Rescue Committee has worked a lot of times with the Clinton Foundation. And it was even noted here where they had a feature of Hillary Clinton herself on one of their pages.
So I hope you'll join me in supporting the International Rescue Committee. Please give today.
Now, there are many speculations in regards to the Clinton Foundation, but as I have stated, some research will be presented, but with no end or conclusion, only presented. This is one of those pieces. Next up, let's examine the philanthropy work associated with Chester Bennington. I think one of the more prominently known and curious ties is Linkin Park and the Clinton Foundation. So before we dive in, let's examine Linkin Park's philanthropic course first. Music for Relief. Music for Relief is a 501c3 charitable organization founded by the rock band Linkin Park in response to the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Throughout, they actually received donations and partnered with many celebrities, as they claim, in which Music for Relief responded to more than 30 natural disasters across the continent, providing immediate relief and funding long-term recovery with a focus on sustainability. Here's a list of Music for Relief's efforts that were made in response to natural disasters, as claimed. In 2010, a very deadly and disastrous earthquake hit the already impoverished island, Haiti, putting them in much more devastating matters than before. Amongst many humanitarian efforts being erected by people and organizations, big or small, Linkin Park came in full swing, employing their very own organization, Music for Relief, to put donation efforts to action. We'll come back to Music for Relief. And there were some other philanthropic efforts that were documented on the official Linkin Park YouTube. For instance, the tsunami that affected Japan. SRS. This part is probably the most controversial in all rhetoric surrounding the death of Chester Bennington. But let me clarify some points about SRS, which stands for Sustainable Recycling Solutions. First, the narrative online seems to conflate Music for Relief efforts with SRS. These two are separate and different organizations. SRS was owned by Mike Shinoda and his business partners, Andrew McCullough and Brett Williams. A big detail to ingest: Chester was not involved in SRS. This was a project of Shinoda and said business partners. Shinoda visited Haiti in 2013. 3 years after the big devastating earthquake. While there, he visited his business, SRS. But before we proceed into Shinoda's SRS, I will mention that Linkin Park's Music for Relief did work quite a bit with Save the Children. Some insight about the endeavors of SRS was written by Mike Shinoda himself as a contributor for Huffington Post. From rock star to the recycling business, where he writes, "My name is Mike Shinoda. I sing and write music in the band Linkin Park. Most people are surprised to find out that although I live in Los Angeles, I'm also an investor in a recycling center in Haiti. The story of how I got started with recycling in Haiti began in disaster recovery." Some clarified concrete details here. "My bandmates and I run a nonprofit called Music for Relief, which focuses on rallying the music community to combat climate change and provide relief to victims of natural disasters. After the earthquake in Haiti, the majority of our efforts were focused on Port-au-Prince. A childhood friend of mine, Andrew McCullough, was one of our main contacts on the ground in Haiti. He worked for an NGO and spent the good part of the year in the areas hit hardest by the disaster. When he came back, I had him over for dinner of Haiti. He said they have 75% unemployment rate, over 50% illiteracy, and cholera is about to be upgraded to endemic status. You know what would solve all these problems? A sustainable recycling program. I'm thinking about starting one." And then it kind of forwards in. It doesn't really give too much detail entailing the startup of this business. He does dive straight into the priming details that might support this idea to start the business, where he goes into the fact that Port-au-Prince, the Haitian city, was densely populated, and within this densely populated city, it is also very trash ridden, where there are plastic bottles and trash that are just littered across the city, causing illnesses like cholera, in which he then goes into making our recycling program a nonprofit was at first a consideration. But Andrew, our other partner, Brett Williams, and I decided that treating it like a charity would make it hard to sustain. And more importantly, we wanted the Haitian people to collect plastic for SRS to be rewarded not only with a proper wage, but a sense of pride that they had a steady job and were cleaning up their community. We decided to make it a social business. Boiling down the idea, it was to get the plastic trash off the Haitian streets and turned for profiting recyclable ventures like goods and clothing. Shinoda states that they had more supply than they can handle and were about to shut the doors for good. Then they sought help from the Clinton Foundation. He continues, "But we weren't done. After working together for months on a business plan and market opportunities, the Clinton Foundation came to our aid. Everyone who has worked in Haiti told us that President Clinton and his team were passionate about supporting the country, and our firsthand experience with him was consistent with that reputation. The foundation provided a grant not only that allowed us to regain our balance, but allowed SRS to make plans for a sustainable and exciting future." Now, I find that particular statement very curious and interesting coming from Mike Shinoda back in 2014 working with the Clintons, because there has been a lot of backlash against the Clintons and their involvement with Haiti. You can see it here in a headline headed by the BBC, where it is actually inquisitive into the activities that the Clintons had in Haiti. In fact, there have been Haitian protesters that have been very vocal, and let alone you won't see it yourself because, of course, you have the mainstream and their gatekeepers from letting you know this information. But I also like to add that back in 2010, there was an additional controversy that a woman by the name of Laura Silsby was actually arrested for transporting about 33 children in a bus, and her charges included trafficking and conspiracy to commit a crime. This is something that is very mysterious, to say the least, because it's been It's been alleged that she was also advocated and intervened by Hillary Clinton herself. And I'm just going to say by some alleged leaked emails. Okay. Again, this is a big controversy. I would encourage you to go explore on your own. But I mention this because if this happened back in 2010, and it was notable that in natural disasters, especially something as big as the Haitian earthquake, attracted the likes of, people who exploit other people, especially children, in natural disasters. This would be something that would raise a red flag. But I just have to drop that piece of information for you guys to also purvey for yourself. Now, attributing to this theme of backlash against the Clintons and their activity in Haiti, ABC News, yes, ABC News, back in 2016, they did an investigative piece in the activities thereof and some possible indications that there was misappropriation of funds. Now, they zone in on this instance of Bill and Hillary Clinton hailing a factory that upstarted in Caracol, Haiti. Now, this part is also questionable because Caracol was not severely impacted by the earthquake. In fact, it was barely touched by the earthquake, but nonetheless, that's where they started the factory. Now, it is here where it indicates, but the garment factory has underdelivered on projected jobs. Haitian workers have accused managers of bullying and sexual harassment. And an ABC News investigation has found that opening its factory in the Haitian Industrial Park, built with $400 million of global aid, the Korean firm became a Clinton Foundation donor, and its owner invested in a startup company owned by Hillary Clinton's former chief of staff. This is a quote. Now listen to this quote. "This was building back better," in the words of Bill Clinton. Hear that? This was back in the day, okay? This is not the modern day slogan of building back better. This was building back better in the words of Bill Clinton, said Jake Johnston, an analyst with the Center of Economic and Policy Research, a nonpartisan group that studied the earthquake reconstruction. Haiti was going to stand on its own 2 feet, certainly by the standard. It has been a complete failure 6 years later. It's pretty clear that that hasn't happened. Now, continued on throughout this article, it does highlight where there has not been a lot of progress with the funding and the fundraising for the said projects. It says here, but in Port-au-Prince, where neighborhoods still steam with flimsy lean-tos and tarp-covered shacks, residents told ABC News that they harbor frustrations with the way the Clintons marshaled international aid. This is a quote by one of the Haitian natives. "I didn't get any of the money," said Inés Luma, who lives crammed with 5 relatives in a makeshift home of a tarp, wood, and plastic. She said and continued, "I don't think I'm ever going to have a permanent house." Now, taking this direct quote from a Haitian native, the Clintons actually advocated for a luxury hotel to be built in Port-au-Prince. Get this. At the same time, the Clinton Foundation says it facilitated the construction of a luxury hotel in Port-au-Prince, a Marriott owned by Dennis O'Brien, who has given $10 million to a $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. O'Brien, an Irish billionaire who runs the Jamaica-based telecom giant Digicel, said that he financed the hotel himself. And it says here, quoted by one of the analysts, "The Marriott was one of the several hotel projects pursued in Haiti. Johnston said he believes more energy should have been dedicated to housing instead. It speaks to putting the political priorities over the actual needs on the ground," he said. So with this is a bigger story. Again, maybe I'll do a separate piece on just this, but I feel that there needs to be some form of responsibility for at least people who got involved with the Clintons and maybe didn't know the scope of how this may have been mishandled. But with this being said, I feel that there should be a responsibility to at least address this. And it was reported by the Philanthropy News Digest that the Clinton Foundation actually gave them a $250,000 grant. Alongside with them, an entrepreneur philanthropist, Todd Wagner, also helped them with this joint venture. So Todd Wagner, he is a billionaire who worked with Mark Cuban, and in 1999, he sold a startup called Broadcast.com to Yahoo for about $5.7 billion. Shortly after that, he moved into philanthropy. And after he moved into philanthropy, he found different ways to raise money for charities, including one very familiar way called Charity Buzz, in which was a charity auction website. This is similar to Luminary Lane, something that Chris Cornell started with his foundation, the Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation. So clocking back to 𝘧𝘂𝘐𝑡𝑦. Now, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, some information is just interesting enough to present to you. Now, I find the timing of these events very, very interesting. So with that, here it is. So we just learned that back in April of 2014, Mike Shinoda made the contributive post to the Huffington Post announcing his venture at 𝘧𝘂𝘐𝑡𝑦. He also announced in this article about the grant given to them by the Clinton Foundation. As we learned, alleged in this other article that I just ran over with you guys, this was around $250,000 and also was possibly in a joint venture with a billionaire, Todd Wagner, right? Okay, so proceeded in May of 2014. Chester Bennington actually did meet Bill Clinton at Rock in Rio at a concert that they were putting on. Now, again, I already clarified that 𝘧𝘂𝘐𝑡𝑦 and Music for Relief were two separate ventures. However, I do have to present that he did meet Bill Clinton. Now, the contents of that meeting are really unknown because there's not a lot of transparency to that. But here it is presented to you. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting though. So, April 2014, they get this grant from the Clinton Foundation. In September of 2014, you can probably conceive that operations were probably slowing down at 𝘧𝘂𝘂𝘐𝑡𝑦 because on the 𝘧𝘂𝘂𝘐𝑡𝑦 Facebook page, one of their last posts was in September of 2014. So given this information, it's interesting because if you're just given a grant of $250,000 by the Clinton Foundation in April, what happened between the timing of April and September where that grant somehow didn't upkeep the operations? Again, reminding you that this grant was intended to keep the doors open as 𝘧𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘐𝑡𝑦, and to that, there's a mystery. There's not a lot of transparency as to the dwindle down of this work. Now, looking for corporate profiles, we did find one for one of the financial backers, Andrew McCalla, in which it lists a company by the name of Recycle Haiti LLC. The relativity to 𝘧𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘓 right now is not definitive. However, the timing is a bit parallel. But as you can see, November 1st, 2016, they actually canceled this profile. Another interesting thing to point out is it seems to be that this was a common entity that helped them with legal and paperwork and administration, because the Recycle Haiti LLC was registered at the same location as Chris Cornell's Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation. And depending on how you interpret it, you know, this could be a very commonplace, as I mentioned, where entertainment industry individuals do file in Los Angeles for their businesses, corporations, and nonprofits. So given this clarity that Chester Bennington had nothing to do with SRS, but had everything to do with Music for Relief, it does not negate the fact that Chester Bennington was definitely impassioned to combat adversities faced by those that were most vulnerable, especially in natural disaster situations that actually cause a lot of displacement. And this was also foreshadowed in the song Not Alone from the Music for Relief project, which was financed by Linkin Park. Chester was never part of this company, neither in testimonial or in finance. But something curious. As you guys know, Chester Bennington was pretty open about his dark past in his childhood of being a victim of child sexual abuse, which also gives us insight to his motives in combating this horrific dark industry. Now, something really admirable that was discovered in the research for this documentary was that Chester Bennington was actually demonstrably avid about combating human trafficking in local efforts. Check this out. This was something surprising within the research of this documentary that was discovered. 𝘏𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝑗, who was then the Orange County District Attorney, tweeted this out a year after Chester Bennington's passing. It was directed towards Chester Bennington's family, in which it reads in the tweet, "Today marks 1 year since Chester Bennington's passing. Bennington of Linkin Park was one of the pioneering supporters in OCDA's fight against human trafficking and exploitation. We continue to pursue justice in honor of Chester and all sexual abuse victims," in which features a screenshot of the letter that was sent to Chester Bennington's family, along with the screenshot that shows an exchange in email by Chester Bennington himself. It reads, "July 27, 2017, to the family of Chester Bennington, on behalf of the Orange County District Attorney's Office, OCDA, I would like to extend our sincerest condolences to the Bennington family. Chester was one of the pioneering supporters in OCDA's fight against human trafficking and exploitation. For most of his life, Chester suffered as a victim of long-term sexual abuse. He turned his pain into music that eased the heartache of millions of people around the world. As you can see below, Chester had a passionate desire to help others through dark times. His poignant lyrics and emotional songs made those who felt alone not feel invisible." And we'll read aloud this screenshot of the email exchange with Chester Bennington, where it reads, "Thank you for passing this along. I will be sure to bring this to the band ASAP. I am positive that we will be willing to work with the OCDA to do whatever we can to put an end to human trafficking in our communities. Thanks, redacted name, signed Chester Bennington in cryptic symbols." The letter closes with this statement: "In his honor and in honor of every victim of sexual abuse, the OCDA will continue in our fight to vigorously pursue justice. Our hearts and prayers are with the Bennington family during this tragic time. Sincerely, 𝘏𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀, District Attorney." So from this email exchange, in which it indicates that there was some effort that was intended to bring awareness to human trafficking, it indicates that Chester Bennington actually wanted to relay some form of project or some form of effort to bring awareness to this dark industry, and which brings me to wonder whatever happened with that. Why was this never brought to the public, and why was this never mobilized through Music for Relief? That's a big curiosity, and I don't have the answer for that. In my intro, I did state that there were some interesting characters that will be presented. Now, this particular person is a deep-pocketed billionaire. Ron Burkle is a deep-pocketed billionaire investor with connections to Hollywood and people in politics. Mr. Ron Burkle is a managing partner at 𝐕𝐤𝐫𝐻 Companies, a private equity firm based in Los Angeles. He made numerous investments, including Music for Relief, as noted in these 2016 financial expenditures, his name noted as a donor for more than $10,000. Ironically, Burkle has a person in common with Linkin Park's philanthropic theme, Bill Clinton. Although they were once close, I'll caveat this part that that's not the case any longer. And that part is also mysterious. We'll get into that. You see, When Bill left the White House, Ron employed Bill at 𝐕𝐤𝐫𝐻 shortly after his presidency. Bloomberg did a business profile on Ron Burkle back in 2010 in a now deleted article, in which still contains a lot of very interesting information for us to know. The other Ron Burkle, it states, around 1990, Burkle, a social liberal and fiscal conservative, started holding political fundraisers at his Green Acres estate in Beverly Hills. That drew notice from the then Arkansas governor, Bill Clinton. They met for the first time at Green Acres in 1992, and the two ambitious men from modest beginnings became fast and close friends. Since 1992, Burkle has donated $1.86 million to the Democratic Party. Makes you wonder why this article was deleted, because as you can preface, this gives a very friendly tone to both said individuals, Burkle and Clinton. When President Clinton visited Los Angeles, he often stayed at Green Acres. For 5 years after Clinton left office, he was an advisor to 𝘕𝐤𝐵𝘳, earning at least $15 million for making phone calls, brokering introductions, and giving speeches on 𝘕𝐤𝐵𝘳's behalf. The relationship was meaningful and transactional. Clinton, who refused comment for this story, brought Burkle into circles of government and celebrity he would never have been able to crack on his own. Burkle gave Clinton high-paid, easy work. Each brought the other fair amount of trouble. Get this quote. When Clinton left the presidency, he had to make money, and there were certain limits on how he could do it, says Burkle. In that regard, having him work for 𝘕𝐤𝐵𝘳 was the right thing to do. In other ways, it was the dumbest thing I ever did. Burkle essentially throws Bill under the bus. What he's saying here is that Bill Clinton, with all of his scandal, brought negative attention to Burkle and his association with him. Bloomberg continues into their softball profile of him by going further. Clinton's post-presidential business and social life received intense scrutiny, and Burkle, the divorced billionaire with a Boeing BA 757, became an object of curiosity and often scorn. If someone wanted to embarrass Clinton, I got thrown in it too, says Burkle. I got all that for free. Burkle also received a lot of attention when he unsuccessfully sued 𝐰𝐞𝐫𝐿 over a failed partnership, and when he claimed he was a victim of an extortion attempt by New York gossip reporter. Curiosity and scorn? No. Let me tell you what Bloomberg was actually alluding to with this Boeing 757 of Ron's. Quick flash to a Vanity Fair article that was a bit more truthful and transparent about this. Yes, Vanity Fair. Burkle's usual means of transport is the custom-converted Boeing 757 that Clinton calls Ron Air, and that Burkle's own circle of young aides privately refer to as Air 1. Clinton himself had arrived on private plane of another California friend, the real estate heir, Democratic donor, liberal activist, and sometime movie and music producer Steve Bing, whose colorful private life includes fathering a child out of wedlock with actress Elizabeth Hurley and suing the billionaire investor Kirk Kerkorian for invasion of privacy, alleging that private investigators for Kerkorian swiped Bing's dental floss out of his trash in a successful effort to prove that Bing's DNA matched that of a child delivered by Kerkorian's ex-wife, the former tennis pro Lisa Bonder. The suit was later settled out of court. Enters Steve Bing. Keep Steve Bing's name on Park. We will go through this in a bit, but as you can see, the details accompanied with Ron Burkle's extracurricular activities aren't exactly as mute as Bloomberg wanted to put it. But continued on, they end also a bit opaque with the closing of their article covering the closing of Bill and Burkle's relationship. When Hillary Clinton was nominated as Secretary of State in 2008, Bill severed his ties with 𝐕𝐤𝐴 and 𝘚𝑟𝑘le. Some of 𝐕𝐤𝐴's business dealings were getting messy. It hired as consultants the now jailed Italian developer Raffaello Folieri and took on Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai, as a partner. 𝘚𝑟𝑘le says he and Clinton don't see much of each other anymore and explains the rupture this way. Quoted, "Before, every trip with him seemed like once in a lifetime opportunity. Now I have so many things to do." Well, geez, just like that, from all the escapades and being so close in friendship, 𝘚𝑟𝑘le even had a room reserved at his residence for Bill Clinton. It states here in a Daily Beast article that Bill Clinton had his own designated bedroom at Ron 𝘚𝑟𝑘le's estate in Beverly Hills. Quite cozy, weren't they? Ron 𝘚𝑟𝑘le, along with Bill Clinton, were also both associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Here you can see Ron's name in Epstein's little black book. And according to an article by Intelligencer, Ron and Bill were logged flying the Lolita Express for a trip to Africa. It states here, 𝘚𝑟𝑘le took what were described as humanitarian trips to Africa with Bill Clinton on Epstein's private Boeing 727. According to a 2008 Vanity Fair feature about the former president, 𝘚𝑟𝑘le's usual means of a transport is the custom-converted Boeing 757 that Clinton calls Ron Air and that 𝘚𝑟𝑘le's own circle of young aides privately refer to as Air 1. So I told you guys to park Steve Bing's name. He was notable to be in this very circle. In June of 2020, it was reported that Steve Bing died, that he had plunged himself from his high-story apartment building. From a report from online article Deadline, it states, Steve Bing, the film financier and philanthropist who backed hit movies from Robert Zemeckis' The Polar Express and Beowulf to the Rolling Stones concert movie Shine a Light, has died. According to law enforcement sources, Bing jumped from a Century City building at around 1 p.m. Monday. Following standard protocol, the Los Angeles Police Department would not confirm that the individual in question was Bing. However, the description of the man in his 50s was found dead on the scene fits the one of the producer. Bing, also an influential political donor, was a real estate tycoon from a family with a rich history. In 2012, he pledged $30 million, a legacy gift, to the Motion Picture and Television Fund. On Tuesday, former President Bill Clinton issued a statement saying, "I loved Steve Bing very much. He had a big heart and he was willing to do anything he could for the people and causes he believed in. I will miss him and his enthusiasm more than I can say, and I hope he's finally found peace." They also state, more recently, he joined with fellow deep-pocketed financiers Ron 𝘚𝑟𝑘le, Terry Semel, Arnon Milken's New Regency, and James Packer and Brett Ratner's Rat Pack Entertainment to finance Warren Beatty's 2 decades in the making Howard Hughes movie Rules Don't Apply, which was released in 2016. Interesting fact upcoming, in 2000, when Democratic National Committee was struggling to find donors to pay for the party's convention in Los Angeles that year, then DNC fundraiser Terry McAuliffe visited 𝘚𝑟𝑘le's house to line up funding. McAuliffe wrote in his book that he was a bit taken back when Bing arrived, wearing ripped up old jeans and a t-shirt with holes in it. McAuliffe wrote that he thought Bing might be a pool man or a gardener. When McAuliffe gave him the pitch, Bing said, "All right, I'll help you out." Then, according to McAuliffe, Bing pulled out a crumpled check out of his jeans pocket, unfolded it, and had run his hand over it a few times to get it straightened out enough to write on it. Bing wrote out the figure, $1 million. Again, this was a DNC fundraiser. Another really startling death connected to Ron 𝘚𝑟𝑘le. Ron 𝘚𝑟𝑘le's son, Andrew 𝘚𝑟𝑘le, to this day has had one of the most mysterious deaths. In January of 2020, People magazine reported billionaire businessman Ronald Burkle's son, Andrew, found dead at 26 in his Beverly Hills home. They state, Andrew Burkle, the son of billionaire businessman Ronald Burkle, has been found dead in his Beverly Hills home, People confirms. Andrew was confirmed dead on Monday by authorities and will be remembered as a young man full of life, his family said in a statement to People. He was 26. This was the statement. Andrew was known as a young man full of life and entrepreneurial energy. Everyone he met commented on his humble demeanor and hard work, the statement continues. While the family appreciates the outpouring of love and support, they ask that the privacy of the family be respected during this difficult time. There are no further details at this time. At around 7:26 p.m. on Monday, police received a call about an unconscious male. A spokesman for the Beverly Hills Police Department tells People. When officials arrived on scene, first responders determined the male was deceased. Authorities have yet to publicly identify Andrew. A source tells People Andrew is believed to have died early Monday in his apartment, but was found later that evening. Ron, 67, rushed to the scene and was there with police, the source added. Andrew's sudden death comes after he spent Christmas with family. He shared a joyful Instagram post on December 25th, which shows him posing in front of a massive Christmas tree. You can scour the internet today and find that there is absolutely no mention of the cause of death of Andrew Burkle. I know that that was a lot to unpack, but realize that all of this was necessary for us to truly understand what happened to Chris Cornell, then Chester Bennington. We had to set narratives straight. We had to unpack this, untangle this, and just realize that facts for what stand surrounding these two rockers are enough for us to speculate that something wasn't right in their death. And with that being said, this brings us to a close to part 1 of a part 3 series. Next up, we will be exploring the death of Chris Cornell and the very questionable matters that surrounded it. Thank you so much for watching this. This ride is in motion and it's going fast.